Hello, everyone. My name is Juliana Topley, and this is a professional development session on active reading strategies for comprehension in the classroom. So, to begin, we're going to talk about the importance of active reading. Active reading is an essential skill for all students to become successful both inside and outside of the classroom, and that also goes for all content areas. So, a lot of time when we think of active reading, we maybe think of it only in reading class or a language arts class, but we need to keep in mind that active reading is even more important in subjects like math, social studies, science, where the content gets a little bit more challenging and there's more content specific vocabulary that our students might not know. The next point I want to make is that educators must teach reading effectively for the students to enjoy both their pleasure reading, the books they pick out for themselves at home, or just reading for fun, and they also need to enjoy the active reading that we ask them to do in the classroom. So those times that we set a purpose for their reading where they have an end goal. There are also strategies that are specifically taught to foster active reading, and they require specific resources that you're going to include in your classroom. So, we are going to go into some of those resources that you use with your students right now. Before we go over the resources and the strategies of what you can use, what do active readers do is the question. So active readers always preview the text. They're going to look through what they're about to read, look at the text features, look at the pictures, the illustrations, whatever it may be, to preview the topic of what they're going to be learning about or what questions they're going to answer. Set a purpose for their reading, whether the purpose is given to them or not. They should always set an end goal or a purpose of what they are to get out of their reading. So why are they reading that today? What is their main goal? Questioning, so asking questions, whether it's them asking themselves questions or asking questions to their teacher or looking for the answers to questions that may be presented to them by their teacher. So constantly questioning, why is the author doing this? Why are they telling us this? Why are they giving us these facts? To make more meaning out of the text, to dig deeper. Also to go deeper into the text, making connections both with things the kids have already learned in the classroom and things that they might have already known previously with their background knowledge. So retrieving and utilizing that background knowledge constantly to make those connections. They are all intertwined. Making predictions. This can go along with setting a purpose. It keeps them engaged, seeing if they're right, if their prediction is correct, even finding out if it's not correct, what was the twist, what changed. Visualization, so they're always wanting to visualize what they're reading, whether it's a science topic, math topic, social studies, even language arts. If it's a picture, they're visualizing the setting maybe, always making those visualizations to stay connected and to stay engaged. Self-monitoring, so we teach this all the time to our students, maybe even without thinking about it, whether it's the finger tracking, just being cognizant of what they are reading, and self-monitoring for mistakes, going back and rereading maybe to make a better meaning. And lastly, making inferences. So making inferences in their texts, making those outside of explicit answer connections. So answering those implicit questions, going outside of the box. The next slide says active learning and reading shifts teacher-centered learning to student-centered learning. So what this means is we are veering away from the teacher explicitly teaching the kids in front of the classroom, and the kids are now digging deeper within their own knowledge and themselves to learn and create their own learning. So they're making their own meaning making, which down the line will help them retain that information and help them make that information their own so that they remember it longer and they can easily retrieve it from their background knowledge. Classroom strategy. So this is my first strategy I'm going to talk about. This is close reading annotation markers. So this right here to the right hand side is something that we give our students, and this is a code that they would use to mark up their writing. So an I for eye-catching, arrow for important, a brain for challenging, a book for proper nouns or headings, and then a question mark if they don't know, if it's unfamiliar. And this is what they would do in a cold read or their first read. But these strategies and symbols would need to be explicitly taught before the kids can use them. Once they're taught, the kids kind of seamlessly incorporate this to their reading every day. We would give them, these are the constant reminder if it's on a bookmark or if it's on a piece of paper, reminding them to be an active reader. Why do we use these symbols? Students should use a sticky note. They could use this in their books that don't belong to them. They can put these symbols on a sticky note. For example, their mentor texts in a textbook. Absolutely use a sticky note to keep track of this coding. And then they can write down their thoughts and symbols, which makes it a physical, tangible act. So it's really engaging them more heavily into their reading and to make further connections and questions, and just encompassing another form of instruction or another form of learning for students. The next one is just more visuals of closed reading markers. So this is something the kids would use for nonfiction or fiction. We call these signposts, so you can see these and how they would be utilized in your classroom. I especially like for the nonfiction, the heart. They love this part. It just gives them ownership of what they like. Quotations, to use quotation marks, because that's an important skill, especially in third grade, that I'm working through with my students of when to use dialogue. So some other teachers might find that super helpful. Just highlight every time that they're seeing it. For fictional characters, CC for character change, whereas the big shift in the character, what happened here, why is the character doing this, could be a question. Words of the Wiser is also a great one. What is the life lesson? So we always talk about the moral of the story or the purpose of the story. So that's a great way to put it to help the kids easily remember. Another strategy would be a graphic organizer. This is just one example of the kids comparing. Usually a compare and contrast is always a Venn diagram, but this is something that I created that's a little bit different, a little bit more kid-friendly for the students to visually see. We talked about point of view, the way a character thinks or feels. So you can see they read a story, The Three Little Pigs. We read two versions from the wolf's perspective and the pigs, and we compared those thoughts. But these help the students visually see the information they're collecting. It allows them to make the connections and physically see them in front of them. And it's just a little bit more fun for them. The pictures, the way it's set up, it could be helpful to just learn, and they can make that connection to better remember it and comprehend it later on. Another strategy is incorporating multimodal texts. So especially that the world we're living in right now, using virtual literacy and different types of literacy is so important. So I used Pebble Go as one example. This is an awesome interactive resource for the kids. There's a ton of articles, a ton of different topics and subjects where the students can go on. They can see pictures, they can engage with the screen, they can change their tabs, they can have the audio played out. So if they don't understand a word, they can listen to it. They also have read vocabulary words. So those words they're probably not familiar with, they can click on them and get a deeper definition. And then there's these wonderful things that go along. This is just a worksheet that you could print off to draw a picture of the water cycle. The water cycle is important because, and facts about the water cycle. So things to hold them accountable. So these are things that just reach all of our different types of learning experiences for the kids. And we have a ton of these resources readily available, and it's just incorporating them into the classroom that's the hardest part. Just reminding ourselves that they are there and ready to be used. And it helps to bridge those already known concepts to new things. So they might see something they already learned in this multimodal text, and they can connect it to the new things that we are learning in the classroom. And this is onto our research. So critical reading, this is the article that was chosen. Critical reading, using reading prompts to promote active engagement with text. So students read in a variety of ways, and to be an active reader, they must be engaged with the text to make substantial meaning. So they need to be engaged, they need to be interested in what they're reading, they need to be paying attention to what they're reading, not just reading it to get it finished. They need to be present. And incorporating all these different factors really help our students to be present, help them stop and jot, stop and think, why am I reading this? And always remembering their purpose. So this critical reading tactics include raising vital questions and problems from the text, seeing which problems are there, gathering and assessing relevant information, and then offering plausible interpretations of that information. So making it their own, seeing what they infer from it. Testing their interpretations against previous knowledge or experience. So taking their biases or their background knowledge that they already know, and then seeing how they're going to interpret it there from what their own experiences have been previously. Examining the assumptions and the implications of those assumptions. So talking to the kids about our own bias, about what that bias does when we're reading, how to put that bias aside and really understand what the author's purpose is without that underlying feeling because we already know something about the topic or we already feel a certain way. And then lastly, using what they have read to communicate effectively with others or to develop potential solutions to complex problems. So really using these skills to incorporate into a group setting. So how can I use these in my group? What can we talk about? How can we problem solve? How can we take this a step further? So this is another chart or a strategy that can be used. What questions do active readers ask themselves? So this is another chart that you can use. It's kind of like a KWL chart, but it's set up a little bit differently. What do I already know? What do I wonder? And now what have I learned? These are some questions the kids can ask to constantly be involved and immersed in their reading, make them write, make them have a conversation, incorporate those different strategies into one topic so that their takeaway is always greater. And to conclude, these are the main takeaways of this presentation and of this professional development. Active reading strategies will increase comprehension and understanding. Active reading sets a purpose for students. Active reading will increase student engagement with a variety of texts, and active reading leads to a student-centered learning environment. So our goal as educators is to create active readers in the classroom so that we foster them, we teach them all of these things, and then they can go off and use those active reading strategies in their everyday lives.